Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro, this is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin. This is Anatomy of a Movie.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for Anatomy of a Movie. I'm John Comerford, and I'm joined on the studio panel by
Phil Svitek,
Sara Stretton,
Demetri Panos. Happy October, everybody.
Yes, and also humming in the booth is...
Hello, it's Marisa Serafini.
Great. First of all, we want to thank AfterBuzz TV for helping us and allowing us the studio time and incubating this particular podcast series. It's getting us up and running, and we appreciate that. So, from now on, we'll be on our own. Well, shortly, we'll be on our own with our own graphics, our own music, etc. We'll bring that to you as soon as we have it. So we just saw Rush, and that's what we want to talk about. It looks go ahead, jump right in.
Now you continue your lovely introduction. I'm just so excited to talk about this movie. I personally am already a huge fan. I'll probably be buying this movie.
Well, you were most looking forward to seeing it, and I think we mentioned that on the last podcast. Did it live up?
Definitely. I think one thing that took me by surprise was I knew I was going into a movie about a rivalry, but I thought the whole thing was really going to be focused on James Hunt, Liam Hemsworth's role. I really thought it was going to be coming from his perspective, just from like ads, seeing the posters. I've been seeing his face everywhere.
Well, yeah, that's how they're selling it.
Yes, and I was actually shocked. I get to the theater, I saw it in IMAX, which I'm really happy I did, and I advise anyone who hasn't seen it yet to see it in IMAX. But the actual advertisement on the IMAX was Lauda, and I was like, who's that? Like, I thought I was about to see the wrong movie because it was like really small, and I was like, that's not Liam Hemsworth. And so the fact that they did that, and it was really even between the two, between their histories, between their viewpoints, I loved that. And I love being surprised by moments in like trailers. And there's one line in the trailer that I totally thought was coming from Lauda's, like, not aspiration, but approval of James Hunt's role, and then I get into it, and it's definitely way more intense, like bitterness between the two. So the fact that I was surprised, and I really just felt the adrenaline the whole film, I was really happy.
Great. So it fulfilled your expectations.
Yes.
Dimitri, what do you have to say?
Yeah, it fulfilled my expectations. I'll admit I didn't go in. As Sarah did. Once I heard that Ron Howard was making this movie and that it was about Niki Lauda, the first thing I did was I went onto YouTube.
Right.
Because I knew there was a crash involved, and I went onto YouTube and checked it out. And on YouTube, if you search his name, you can see that crash from like every angle possible with a bazillion different commentaries. So I knew about that, but that's pretty much where I stopped because I didn't know necessarily, they said it was going to be about the rivalry, and I didn't know about the rivalry. So for me, going in, just knowing, so when he said, I'm known for, at the very beginning of the movie, when it starts off with Niki Lauda's over voice, and he said, I'm known for two things. And he goes, for world champion, and the second thing's coming up. You know where the movie's going to go. It's just, how does it get there, and how does it get beyond that? And to me, I thought it was great. I thought it was one of Ron Howard's more accomplished films. I mean, if his name wasn't in the credits, I don't think I'd necessarily know that it was a Ron Howard movie per se. But it had the Ron Howard staple of keeping things real and very humanistic. I thought the screenplay was very smart. I liked how, from the beginning, it set up the pins. The overvoice pretty much said what was going to happen. This rivalry was made by the media. It wasn't as bad as they say. We were rivalries. We weren't enemies, and they made a whole, and then the movie went on to show how the rivalry was, where it gets to the end, and two things happen towards the end, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But two things happen, including an overvoice that says, he was probably the man I most respected most when he's talking about James Hunt and Niki Lauda. And and that's what a script should do. A good screenplay should set up the pins, knock them down, bring you from point to point. The other thing that I really loved about it, this movie does not overstay its welcome. It was 2 hours. It got to tell its story. It was lean. It was greatly paced. You know, dare I say, this movie was running on all cylinders for me.
Ooh, nice.
Hey.
Waiting when that was going to come out. All right.
Yeah, I had that in my pocket.
Phil, let us know.
I enjoyed it, you know, and I like how they held out the crash towards the end.
Yeah.
You know, and it kind of built up to that. And I thought it was a great back and forth. And I liked kind of the switch. And of course, I want to get Marissa's thoughts on this, but then I want to kind of I want to get into a camp of who's on James's team and who's on Niki's team. Because here's the thing, I was torn because, you know, as much as they made out James to be this playboy and things like that, and Niki to be, quote, the asshole, there was very good qualities about each of them that I liked, and I was like, well, they're both good.
Yeah.
And they're both stupid.
Yeah.
But,
Yes, exactly.
But I think that's the
exactly.
strength of this movie is that it's not about enemies. It's not about liking one maybe
not-
even more than the other.
It's really not a good cop, bad cop, or black,
Yeah,
white.
they each had their own style that you sort of kind of respect because they respect it. As characters, they respected one, you know, they respected each other. And from that, they didn't hate each other. Obviously, as you get towards the end of the movie, you see that they don't hate each other. And I don't know. I mean, it's a great question. You know, I'm not on anybody's team. I really liked both of them for what they represented and how they each got from point A to point B, or from the start line to finish line. Two different styles that you had to respect.
All right, Marissa, it's your chance.
I really liked this movie. I went into this movie not knowing anything about racing or any Formula One, never heard of that. And I didn't know that this movie was based off of two real people. But this movie made me appreciate the whole art of racing, the technical aspects of it, and all the jargon that they used when they were building the actual race car. But coming out of this movie and seeing how they put it together made me respect the sport and the people who risk their lives every single time they get behind the wheel.
I definitely agree with that.
They're really not unlike if you ever watched like a movie like The Right Stuff. They're really not unlike test pilots.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in a sense, right? Because
you
test
gotta
pilots
have
have
that
that
kind of
same
mentality.
thing. You have
Absolutely.
to.
You gotta live on the edge.
Yeah, and if they know that there's a 20% chance
every
that
time.
you're going to die, and you know, they have to have, obviously, if you compare the two, they're going to be a little cocky. You know, they're going to have personality. And so, I think that what you were saying is, it's very fascinating how that movie was approached. But I think with Ron Howard, the way that it was written, there was a humanistic element. And to go Team Lauda, Team Hunt, it was like it's hard to choose between because.
But I agree with Phil though. There are good and bad points about both characters, and that's what I like because obviously anything else would have been too easy. But they did a really good job of pinging back and forth because I was doing the same thing, going, but then over here, and he's so. And I also did not watch any YouTube. I mean, I knew of Niki Lauda, all that kind of stuff, but I did not watch anything. I didn't want to read anything. I always like to just have the movie come to me and just present it as itself rather than worry about what it is. But this one thing this did do really wanted me to go back and watch the video and the documentary that the BBC put out, and I guess it was earlier in the year as part of promotion for this. But I think I'm in the minority here because I don't think I liked it as much as everybody else. I didn't dislike it. There was so much I did like about it. There was so much for me that didn't work and fell perfunctory.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excited.
You mentioned setting up the pins and all that. And for me, that was in the beginning was too perfunctory for me. It was like, okay, he's got this, and now of course we got to have this scene, got to have that scene. And to me, those things were a little too obvious for me. And it really works for me when the accident happened, because then I really started getting into the characters, and I wanted to know. For me, it was too surface throughout until that happened, and then I was like, there we go, now we're getting into it. And I wanted to dig deeper into these guys and what set them off as rivals, and what created that, and I especially at the end there when they started talking, and I heard the real voiceover, and I saw the real guys. Right. Then I'm going, oh wow, if you had stuck there, I'd be with you more.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I didn't find it perfunctory at all. Like I said, I really enjoyed how it set everything up, because sometimes when you go about a movie like this, you know, a director and or a writer, they can take the tack that it's about the crash. You know, it's about the disaster that happens, because let's face it, sometimes disaster sells, and it could have been about everything leading up to the crash. But this movie ended up being more about that, where the crash was almost, we sort of knew it was going to come. But it wasn't about that. It was about these two people bonding, and they bond in their own way, and that's what I really enjoyed about the movie. And if
I did too.
They didn't exploit the crash.
I like that too. I just wish, for me, I just wish that it was richer and deeper after. I just wish they had brought that towards the beginning, because the beginning to me wasn't as deep and as rich and as textured and layered as conflicted as the end.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, I disagree, but I think what we also have to realize is that while this story of their rivalry might not be as familiar to us, Formula One, the ideas behind Formula One, the passion behind Formula One is familiar in like the rest of the world. And Rush is, I believe, the #1 movie in Ireland and the UK right now. And for me, also, they did exaggerate some of the enemy tendencies. Like, there are exaggerations in this movie that aren't quite factual. And I thought that for us to combine both an international audience and the U.S. audience and kind of have to find that balance of adding history, adding those layers, I think they did a very good job.
I do too, and I take that off of Niki. Niki Lauda said that he liked the way it came out. He was very positive towards it. He didn't think they Hollywoodized it, as I think that is the term he used, or something like that. So, I mean, that guy, he's the guy that lived through it. So, if he thinks they got it right, then okay.
I felt, and they didn't. Like, they could have really exploited the crash. It didn't look like Driven. That was the other thing too. I appreciated, again, through direction, I appreciated the race scenes. And again, to Phil's point, I was actually pleasantly surprised that the crash comes in at about an hour and a half or so into the movie. And, when you're having, again, usually in something like that, you want to exploit that crash. It's going to not take place so far down the line. Crash. And that's what I really respected. And the performances for me too really sealed the deal. I mean, hey folks, if you're thinking, if you're thinking that Thor here, like, this is the only thing that Chris Hemsworth can do, I would say if you've seen this movie, he's the real deal. I really appreciated his presence on screen. He has a really good presence, and coming from Captain Kirk's dad, moving himself up to this role, I thought it was really good, and he was great. Both of them were great to watch. I was never bored at their performances, and I loved it when each one was on screen. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
He was actually, the role of James Hunt was one of the hardest roles they had casting, and they almost put the film on hold. And it was just by friends and acquaintances that Chris Hemsworth ended up sending like a makeshift audition tape with some material from the script, and that's what won him over.
While he was working on Avengers, I believe, isn't that the story? While he was working on Avengers, he had to put together a tape.
I think so.
I was wondering what that costume looked like. How does he drive with that hammer?
Well, he did it while he was eating falafel.
There you go.
Okay.
If you've watched the very end of the Avengers, folks. But and Daniel Bruhl was really good too. It's funny when you talk about the marketing.
At least in America, it's all Hemsworth.
It
he
is.
sells the movie.
You get it, but it is really funny that if you were walking by, if you're in a movie theater and you walk by the poster, it's him, you wouldn't know that this is about formula. You wouldn't know really what this is.
No, you wouldn't know a thing about it, because you just see his face.
Yeah,
big old mug.
How am I the only one who appreciated too that it was a solid, it was a rated R movie?
I didn't even know, to be honest with you, but it makes sense. But I didn't even pay attention to that. I didn't, one way or another, didn't.
That was an aspect of the film.
I mean, all the boobs you didn't.
No,
that didn't go together.
The nude scenes.
I didn't. My point was I was involved enough in the movie. I didn't care what the rating was. I didn't care if it was PG. Obviously it was, but I didn't in the movie go, oh, of course we're in an R. It didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I just liked the fact that again, if you were going to commercialize this film. You would make the racing, sanitize it, make the racing, have more quick cuts, and do this, and it didn't. And I appreciate, again, the decision to go ahead and make an R-rated movie. And, it's 2 weeks in a row where there have been two R-rated movies released. The week before The Prisoner came out, and that was #1. This movie comes out, and it's #1 again, or not again, but it's #1, and I believe it. Over Rush?
The #1 right now is not
Rush. It was Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Yeah, it's not a rated R movie. You're right. I'm wrong, yes.
And by the way,
kick the 40.
it's
Okay.
35 million as opposed to 10 million for. So
Yeah, yeah.
there's a big deal there.
It was
That's
2
very
then.
Yeah.
But
But
it's
it's
because
getting
it tries harder.
88% on Rotten
It
Tomatoes.
is getting
That
yeah,
is.
But you know, it's again. I just think that it's something to something for adults to go to. It's funny. I went to the prisoners, and there were at least 3 families or 3 groups of people. I'll call them who brought kids who were at the very
You're
least
kidding.
I kid you
To the
not. To
prisoners?
the prisoners. I'm like, what the hell are you
Okay.
doing?
All right.
Right. Not the case with Rush.
No.
I guess the kids didn't, kids didn't mind being kidnapped and torture. And
That's
But
crazy.
Rush, no, it was pretty much all adults, couple of dates, but there was not one kid in the theater that I saw it at, which was like, okay, interesting.
All right, let's get into the script a little bit more. Peter Morgan wrote the script, and he obviously wrote Frost Nixon and The Queen. Was nominated for Academy Award. Now I read that he did this on spec, so he didn't. Nobody hired him to do so. He just thought the story and the characters were so interesting. The real people were so interesting that he wrote the thing. Couldn't help but write it because he just had to. And also, I think his wife is Austrian, and he lives in Austria, I believe. So he's very well of Niki Lauda, aware of Niki Lauda. And what do we think of the script? Do we if we can compare it to his other scripts, what do we like about it? What is it that you guys want to discuss about it? Jump in.
I mean, I think that I really loved some of the writing because for me, I love when lines can circle back and be intersected in different parts of the movie and mean different things. And for instance, about, I want to say halfway through the movie, you hear Lauda say that happiness is the enemy to his wife, in which she replies, like, you've already lost. But then we get to see later on at the very end, he also brings back enemies right before saying that he not only liked and respected, but that Hemsworth or Hunt was the one person he ever envied. And taking that and being able to say, well, originally, yes, happiness could be the enemy because it made him lose a little bit of his drive. His enemy, or rivalry, was what ended up leading him to be happy, leading him to kind of, in a way, feel satisfied. And I feel like you kind of saw that and the change in his mentality. Like when I first got in this film, I was torn between whose side I was going to be on, because you kind of you end up wanting to
Phil's
pick
point.
sides.
Right.
And I kept thinking, oh well, Hunt's going to be the one to like kind of grow up. But I think I really saw through the scripts that it was Lauda who grew up more. He was just like, his nickname in real life was the Computer, and just this like businessman who's just mentally driven to know every detail and kind of be cold, and to me see life as happiness, and makes it feel empty. And he gained so much in his life through this other person.
Well, if you think in terms of script and arcs and everything, well, Lauda is the character.
Yeah,
that has
absolutely.
The arc. You know,
It
Hunt
starts
really
off
doesn't
with
have
his-
an arc.
yeah.
He is the way he is and stays the way he
It
stays.
stays the way he is. And I mean, the movie opens up on Lauda's
Yeah.
overvoice, and it ends on his overvoice. I thought the screenplay was really well done, and to your point, I thought it had some great dialogue. Like, one of my favorite, again, you could have really made this movie about them being enemies, like the media portrayed them to be, like these. But again, one of my favorite lines was James Hunt, Niki Lauda, and James Hunt admits, just to set up the scene, prior to that crash, prior to the crash, it was terrible weather. They're having a committee, a meeting with the racers, and Niki Lauda says, guys, I don't think we should do this. He goes, I think we should cancel this race. I think it's a bad idea to get out there. And it's James Hunt who sort of kind of gets the crowd to go with him, going, Niki, come on, of course you want to cancel the race because then we can't get points. And he sways the crowd to go on with the race, even though James Hunt probably knew in his heart that might not have been the best decision. The crash happens, and it plagues Hunt for a while, so that when he sees him for the first time, he comes out and says, look, I feel really responsible for what happened. And Niki Lauda comes back with, trust me, watching you win those races while I was fighting for my life, you were equally responsible for getting me back in the car. And that's the competitive nature of a true rivalry, not an enemy, but like.
Well, there, yeah,
and I
it
like
causes
that.
you to do your best. See, I've
Yes.
always, I never agree with the people that. Let's put it this way: I always want, if I'm gonna in a competition with somebody, I don't want to win at all costs. I want them to be at their best and then best them, because
Sure.
that to me is the best win. Rather,
Right.
Who cares if you win if they're hurt or they're not at their best? Big deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that it's like take any sports rivalry. The Ollie Frazier.
Yeah.
You want them working at their best, at their
Bird
peak.
Johnson.
Yeah,
I mean, it reminded me of that
anything,
too, because
absolutely.
they, again, I like that, because I was thinking of that because these guys weren't enemies, but
Yeah.
they were great rivals. But at the end of the day, no matter what team bested what, they still had the respect, and
Right.
they were
And
comrades.
here's the other
They
thing I
were
like
good.
about the way they wrote the characters is they both were top of their game, but in a completely different styles. And then
Yep.
you get to see there is not just one way to succeed.
Yes.
I mean, it takes a whole myriad of ideas and thoughts and behaviors, and it doesn't happen to happen in one way. So, I mean, I just liked that part.
And I think that was smart.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's in the screenwriting. I think, it's really well done.
I want
It's
to
a
add
good
a comment
character
on
story.
both of your
Oh,
points.
here we go.
Oh, boy.
Here we go. First off, on the conversation you mentioned, also that they added another layer. As Hunt's walking out the door, he says, "You could have avoided this, if you had
Right.
friends."
Right.
And adding
If you were
also
nice
that,
with people, if
exactly,
people liked you more. Yeah.
then you could have swayed the vote yourself,
Right.
and I wouldn't be your competition on this level outside
Yeah.
of the racetrack. So adding those other seeds of doubt that maybe this isn't all Hunt's fault. Like, yes, he did sway the argument, but maybe if, Lauda was just a little bit nicer of a person, he wouldn't
could've
have that
won.
effect he had.
Right.
And then on your side of the story, what I think one of the overall themes of this movie is that you can gain success if you can identify what drives you the most. So, I mean, with Lauda, it's knowing the numbers, it's being that businessman, it's getting everything. And because he embraces who he is allowed to succeed. Just as Hunt, by his, like, we do see a moment in the script where he's defeated in a way, and he has to go in and basically plead to be on the team. And
He's got to beg. He
Yes.
has to beg
Yeah.
to get. He'll do almost anything.
Because I think that showed what both characters are willing to sacrifice to
Yes.
give up in order to succeed.
Yeah.
So that
but it's
part
also like how they operate.
Yeah.
It's like you
Right.
really have to know who you are and know what you need to get you that far, and know what motivates you.
The other thing that I really appreciated, I guess from an audience level, because the way they set it up is that Lauda is this rich guy,
Yeah.
and they set him up. And again, I don't know if this was the way it was in real life, but they set him up that he buys his way in.
Apparently
He
that's
buys-
true.
No, which I get, right? But what the movie does is, okay, he buys his way in. Okay, can be considered a swarmy way of doing things. But there wasn't one doubt that his intelligence and his knowledge of race car driving
Yeah.
and how to put together a car,
Yeah.
it was all there. He just, this was the way for
did
him
what
to
he had to
in.
get
He
his
did
foot
what he
in the
had to
door.
do. And
Or his butt in the chair, so to speak.
and I'm not entirely sure, again, because I don't know, I'm not too familiar with the background. I'm not entirely sure that his other colleagues and other racers knew other than he was just a spoiled rich kid who wanted to buy himself into being racing. I don't know if they understood, maybe Hunt knew that he was a really smart guy, but maybe everybody else, I don't know if they knew his smarts about knowing his way around a Formula One car and how to put it together and how to shave off like 5 seconds and that to me was 2.
2.3.
Come on, let's be
Come on.
accurate, guys.
You got it right. We're gonna get letters.
It's funny that you say that because I took it totally different, because when he has the conversation with his father,
Right.
I took it as he was completely getting cut off and had to
Yeah.
find these other ways, and how he really got the money was through going and changing these cars and getting contracts through that, and then from there.
Yeah, because he came from a rich family. I didn't really
Yeah.
get that he was rich because he was cut off. And in fact, that they both kind of came from that. I think they made that point that our families kind of disowned us. So we
Yeah,
had to
right,
find
yeah,
so
yeah.
we started out on our own. And again, I just like that because they start kind of in a similar way. They're both trying like crazy Formula 3.
Sure.
And then, the families have kind of written them off. And they just have different trajectories in terms
Yeah.
of how they get to the top.
But did you get the sense that like Hunt's character was a little bit more like nuts and bolts? Like
Oh,
he
yeah,
raced,
he's
he
the
raced,
blue
he
collar
raced.
guy. The other
Right.
guy's a white collar guy. I mean,
Right.
you can kind of see that.
Yeah, and I thought I liked how they showed it to us, because in real life I'm not sure how it was viewed upon their other races and the media.
Right.
Oh, we're buzzing a little bit. Sorry, guys.
It's
It's
after
a technical difficulty. We've got that covered. Thank you very much, Marissa. All right, so where we okay? So now, Phil, what did you have to say about the script? You're a writer yourself.
I liked, the biggest thing for me was the way they opened up on that voiceover from Niki, and then the switch later happens at the time of the crash, where you cut to James, and he says, "Well, did Niki change his tires?"
Yeah.
Okay, we stick to wet.
We stick to
Yeah, I mean, holding that moment,
Because literally, it just the fact that they can hold that moment for an hour and a half, where basically it ties back to the opening, where they're like, "Okay, you want to change your tires?" And Niki says, "Did he change his?"
Yeah.
Right.
No.
And if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong on this one, but I'm pretty sure in the movie later on, it actually switches. And no, it switches the line where someone else asks if Hunt changed his tires on a different race.
On a different race?
Mm-hmm.
I only
Not
know
on the
one
race
that
of the
Phil's
crash.
talking about.
No, one of the other. Go back, watch it. I'm pretty sure that line is said twice, but slightly shifted between who's saying it about whose tires.
Was it made by the guy that was in World War Z?
Oh yeah.
Was it
I
made
don't know,
by
maybe
him
now we're gonna
to
have to
hunt?
watch it again, but I'm
okay.
pretty sure the line said twice.
But you know what else is fascinating
Francesco
to me?
Favini.
You know
Favino.
what was great? The other thing that was about, okay, I'm not so much into Formula One racing,
Right.
but there was one name, one racer that I think is world renowned that was featured in the movie, even if he was driving by at a bazillion miles an hour, Mario Andretti. Like Mario Andretti, I think is universally known, even to some of us folks
Well,
here
certainly
in
in
the States.
America. Yeah.
Right, but it's not about him.
No.
But like the fact that he was there, and like to me, he was the only outside of our main characters, he's the only other racer that it's like, oh, Mario Andretti was.
I know that
was
name.
through this. I know that name, and
You didn't know Emerson Fittipaldi?
no,
No, okay, just curious. He's another one that most people might know.
yeah,
I did like Clay. They didn't utilize him too much, but the fact that he said, us teammates, we got to stick together.
Right.
And obviously the irony is there that James Hunt and Niki are more teammates than anyone else.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think it is interesting, like how much when you see a movie, you normally expect there to be more than two characters that you talk about. We have all these other roles, but for me, this is a horrible thing to say as an actor, but this movie was solely about them. Like we saw some big names in there too, like Olivia Wilde, but and she's playing.
I want to talk
she
about
has her
that, too.
own story was big in the media of the time with her Richard Burton and Liz Taylor, and those are.
Yeah, but you could almost remove her from.
Yeah.
I agree. I felt it. Yeah,
And I mean,
go ahead.
and that was what I was gonna say also is because I believe Russell Crowe is supposed to make a cameo as Richard Burton,
Richard Burton, yeah.
and it's like, really, it was so easy for them to kind of cut away these other characters, and I think that it's crazy to me that they could, in a way, cut out some of the women, some of the managers, more.
Here's the technique.
And I still would have gotten a lot of the movie.
Here's the technique I feel, right? At the end, when Niki pulls himself out, it's, what does he see? He sees images of his wife, right?
Yep.
And that's why he kind of pulls out, and they left in a helicopter and all that. For James, throughout the whole thing, it's about him partying and things like that. So these are just distractions, and that's and Niki keeps pointing that out to him, like I'm focused. I go home, I rest. You don't. And I think in many ways it's a technique to show all the different distractions of keeping them from their one thing. It's just basically racing.
Right.
Yeah,
and dealing with it.
Yeah, and like when we talk about the women, it was really funny because what the movie opens with Hunt, Chris Hemsworth coming to a hospital, and the girl from Game of Thrones,
Right.
there, the nurse, and so so they have a hot
Natalie
and heavy.
Dormer.
Natalie Dormer. They have a hot and heavy, and she's in it for like 5 minutes, and then the next scene when they're in a nightclub, it's like, where'd she go?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
New
So
girl.
that's how this is gonna. All right. So this is how it plays out. But I will say, I think it's probably one of the few times, or the first time, where Olivia Wilde, she's a very beautiful woman, not a bad actress at all, but I really think she got upstaged by Alexandra Maria Lara, the woman who eventually she plays Marlene Lauda, and I think that woman.
Well, she certainly has
She was
way more
fan-
screen time. That helps.
Yeah,
And
but
she's-
I think the Olivia Wilde character, Susie Miller, could have been played by anybody. It was weird that you would pay. You could have just played it by anyone. And I'm glad they didn't go with Russell Crowe because, to me, anyways, that would have been a distraction. I would have said, it would have really taken me out of the movie. I said, oh, that's Russell Crowe. Oh, okay, he's playing Richard Burton. So, yeah, I think that the woman that played Marlene, I thought she was fantastic. And, you know, Susie Miller's character could have been played by anybody.
Well, that's kind of goes back to that's one of the reasons why I thought it was perfunctory. There's a lot of that particular. I thought they really could have done a little bit more with that, because it seemed like, okay, now he's getting angry. Okay, here's where he's going to get angry because he doesn't have his drive anymore. He's going to get mad at his wife, and okay, there he's drinking, and it all seemed very rote to me in that particular thing. And you're right. I think it could have played by anybody. Olivia Wilde's a great actress. No qualms about her or anything like that. I just think they really didn't flesh that out. And I don't think they used that as much as they could. I agree with Phil, though. I thought it did show the dichotomy between the two. One has a stable home life, the other one doesn't. And great, you did that. But it really didn't. I didn't think they mined that for enough gold as they could have.
See, and like I totally disagree, because I don't think they need it anymore. I was kind of like, okay, Olivia Wilde.
Oh, they didn't need it for this story. I just thought
Yeah.
it would have been much more interesting if I would have learned more about him, because I didn't learn anything about him. I already knew he was a playboy, and I already knew he didn't have much to offer and wasn't going to have a relationship. But
But
I
it was
thought he could have done
to
more.
me-
in
But
terms
he
of more
attempted.
character
He
stuff.
attempted the relationship, and I think, well, you know, I mean, we know he ends up passing away, you know, early in life. But I mean, he attempted. You knew the guy had a heart. I mean, his lifestyle, he wasn't changing that much, but it wasn't like he didn't care for Susie Miller. You know, I think that he cared for her a lot.
I mean, I
don't
think
know
that
that.
he did care for her a lot. I mean, just in reading, though, there are these other little facts that they do they throw in about him. Like, he's obviously said, I'm sure you guys have read, to have slept with like 5,000 women. And in his short life, and that one of them was stewardesses, and they threw that in, that he didn't like to wear shoes, and there's a frame of that. But like with Susie Miller, like it is accurate that he proposed to her within like weeks. And then when they got divorced, a lot of people said that he was actually thankful to be divorced from her, and to give her, and Richard Burton paid $1 million to James Hunt in their divorce settlement. And it even goes that Susie in real life said that she felt like she was traded. So I don't know that it was like inaccurate for him.
See, I think that what you just said was far more interesting than what I saw on screen. That's what I'm saying. That did nothing for me on screen.
It makes me wonder if there was a deleted scene.
Well, could have been.
Because when he went to New York, and there was a scene with the two of them, and he walks out.
Yeah, I like
and all
that
the press
scene. That
is
scene was
there,
great.
And he's like, "Well, let's see. I get to continue to race, and I get to continue to be with women,
the
and I
difference
get
for
a
me
lot
is
of
this.
independent money."
With his wife, I got to see how that affected Niki on a character level.
Right.
With this Susie Miller, I did not get to see how it affected him
No.
or his driving at all.
No.
That's why I said it was a wasted opportunity. 'Cause
Yeah.
it did nothing to show me character.
Well, and again, if we're looking at it from Niki Lauda's eyes, you know, we already said at the beginning, he's the one that we see
Right.
change.
But
I know,
here's the thing
but
for me.
we're also following these two
Following two of them.
characters. Go ahead.
I'll disagree only because there's, you know, as he's drinking, you know, she says, I can't watch you like this. And you're, you know, she basically, for the first time, James gets called an asshole. Not literally, but subtext, right?
Well, by a woman anyway. I mean, he's called an asshole by a lot of people.
I mean, I feel like asshole's the most prominent just in this movie, and just like watching how that goes through the script is quite interesting. I mean, the first mention of asshole in this script is in the first voiceover, where Lauda refers to himself as chasing Hunt like an asshole, which causes his crash.
Right.
And then, of course, that's the first, I believe, the first diss that he gives, and who knows,
So-
yada, yada,
so
yada.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Continue,
Go ahead,
Phil. Yeah, that was my bad. Sorry.
No worries. All right. So, but the point being the fact that, you know, it's moments like that that make you go, okay, this guy, instead of just caring about women and things like that, he actually does want to drive.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't want to just do this to be a playboy and things like that. He does love driving. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
Marissa, you're being awfully quiet.
But here's the thing: we didn't know that.
But
yes,
you know
but
that-
it's
when
nice
he was
moments.
driving, he was happy. You know, he was happy with Susie Miller when he was driving. It was when he was not driving that he wasn't happy with anything in life, and it didn't matter who he had next to him supporting him. But when he was like, if he continued to drive, I mean, I don't know what will happen, but he seemed to be very happy in the position with Susie that he was in and married when he was able to drive. When that was taken away from him, you know, losing all the money, you know, I don't know. Yeah, Marissa, go ahead. What do you think about the Susie Miller,
Well,
James Hunt?
like you said,
depiction?
Olivia Wilde, yeah, she's beautiful and whatnot. And normally she's not forgettable, but this movie, she really was. And I think it was also just the character. And yes, this is a real person that she's based off of, but the way that portrayed this character is that Susie didn't really show a lot of, from what I got, she didn't show as much compassion towards James as Marlene did towards Niki. Throughout all of Niki's accidents, you see Marlene always sticking by his side through his trials and tribulations, and therefore we get more attached to Marlene, and we like her more so than Susie ever did when she wasn't as supportive when James couldn't get his own drive more at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what Marlene's background was. Susie Miller was a socialite, a model, so she was living a high life. She didn't stand by her man. You know, I think that's a great point because Marlene, well, because Niki Lauda was no saint either. I mean, this guy treated people horribly, and he was an asshole to some people.
I'm not sure she didn't stick by her man. I think he probably didn't stick by his woman before she didn't stick by her man.
Well, I don't. There wasn't any suggestion of that while they were together.
Yeah, the infidelity. She said that.
When he was racing?
Well, when they were together as man and wife, they said the drinking, the infidelities. She said all that, and he didn't. Yeah, he didn't bat an eye. Yeah,
and also James didn't really treat Susie as well too, because when Susie's like, "We should do something this weekend." He pretty much told her
That's what I mean.
piss off. You know?
Yeah, but he again. I'm gonna fall at like he wasn't racing at the time. Everything in his life sucked.
Yeah, but you can't say that. I mean, how can you argue that point? While he was racing, he was still having.
He was still doing those things.
Here's the problem,
Okay,
right?
you got me there.
That ties back to in the moment in the hospital. It just goes to show how they interact differently, right?
Yeah.
And it could have been a perfect opportunity. Hey, if you understand me, you know this is the one thing that I need, so please just let me do this. Whereas, Niki said that to her, and she understood and she backed away and let him put on that helmet, despite him just screaming for days.
Right. Yeah, if you love me, you'll walk away or you'll shut up. Or,
just
and she
let me
did.
do this, Don't say anything.
How awesome! Again, that to me is one of those scenes in this movie. It was a great scene. It was an emotional scene, and the fact that it came from like when he fought, it was so excruciating.
To
watch, right?
To watch.
Oh my gosh! Every scene of him in the hospital was just.
The pipe, that was
pipe, the
draining of the lungs.
Oh
That's
yeah,
great.
And then do it again.
Do it again, and they weren't using a Dyson.
No.
That the vacuuming of the lungs, that was like, oh my god. But the scene with the helmet, how they had the camera from inside, because you got the perspective of being inside the helmet and seeing Marlene Lauda there, and you can tell she was to me that was one of the best scenes in the movie. And again, it was very emotional.
I was worried. The one thing I knew about the story was that he, in the crash, Niki Lauda lost his eyelids and had to have them grafted on. And I thought they were going so graphic, and I go, please don't show that. I don't want to see that.
I agree. The pipe on the throat was enough for me.
That was
hard to handle.
But I think they showed a good depiction of what he really did go through.
Oh yeah,
Well,
it was
they
enough.
really did stick a pipe down his throat.
Oh yeah.
Twice.
And it is a sign of the times.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I've never heard the term vacuum lungs until I saw this movie, and I'm not sure what the technology today is.
And apparently, most of that was because of the fire retardant they had to spray and try to put out the fire. He ingested so much of it.
And they had him wrapped up in asbestos.
All right, let's move on to something else. Let's talk director, because we've already talked writing enough. Unless anybody has any last words about writing and the script or anything, I want to just talk more about Ron Howard. Demetri, you were talking about Ron. And I agree with you, the fact that if I didn't know that he had directed this, I wouldn't go, this is a Ron Howard film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you look at this guy's career, he's done almost everything, with the exception of horror. And, he has, I have a filmography, 22 movies. He's just started on a movie called The Heart of the Sea, which is written by the same guy, by the way.
Peter Morgan, nice.
And, this is a guy that started off with working with Roger Corman. He's always had a passion for cars. And when you look at things like Grand Theft Auto, which I believe was his directorial debut. Before that,
not to be associated with the video game.
Not with the video game, but, look at this guy's resume. So Grand Theft Auto, Night Shift, a very
Underrated,
An
amazing
underrated
movie.
comedy, really good. Shelley Long,
Yeah.
Henry Winkler, really good.
Oh my God!
Splash.
I've never seen it.
Oh man,
I'm
this-
sorry.
I don't know how it
Michael-
holds
It was
up, but it was
before I was
amazing. for the
Michael
born.
Keaton. Michael Keaton was born
I'm trying to
See
think of an
Casablanca?
from that movie.
Yes.
Casablanca. Oh jeez.
Another Ron Howard movie.
I'm just trying to create excuses.
No, and then Splash.
Yeah.
I've seen that
Okay.
one.
Oh,
And this is also the same guy, Cocoon.
Yeah.
85. Catch this. 84, he had Splash. 85, Cocoon. 86, Gung Ho. And then he does something different. He goes
Gung Ho,
Willow.
also about cars, by the way.
Right, also about cars. And then he goes and does Willow. He
Which, by the way,
partners
might be the only one that is in the horror section.
up- That's more
Just by-
fantasy.
no, I mean by how it was received.
Yeah, but he did something different.
Yeah.
He went from those comedies and everything, and then he goes back to, he follows that up with Parenthood,
Yeah.
and then he goes Backdraft. Now, I was working at Universal at the time, so at Universal I had Backdraft, Far and Away, The Paper, and Apollo 13.
Yeah.
And when you look, and then he goes from that, he does Ransom in '96, and then had TV, which was okay, and then How the Grinch Stole Christmas, okay, A Beautiful Mind. He follows that
But
up.
I think
with,
more than
Oh,
anything, you can
Grinch
look
Stole
at the
Christmas is
range that he's. I mean, he's a great filmography. I mean, because
yeah,
the
I
range.
mean, and he. But if you look at pretty much all of his movies, like they are very, whether you like them, whether they're good, bad. I can't point to anything that I was like that made me angry, but there's a very humanistic element, and he films. That's the other thing about his filming technique. He's not a flashy director. He likes to get emotion on his actors, which I appreciate. And then he does The Missing. He does like a Western. And then he goes off and does Cinderella Man. So he does another sports movie, a boxing movie. And then he follows that up with The Da Vinci Code. So he goes from Cinderella Man, Beautiful Mind, to like a thriller suspense kind of a movie that was very popular. And then he like really scales back and makes what's, I guess you can consider almost an independent movie. He does Frost Nixon, which is a great, great movie. And again, the humanistic elements in Frost Nixon are really make that, whether you know your history or not.
Interestingly, obviously, because Frost Nixon, that's obviously about two different
Yeah.
characters, and I saw this the very same way. I mean, in fact, he used a lot of the same team
Yeah.
for this, and I thought that I think that was the approach they took. It's about, you were saying earlier, it's the two characters. That's all you're really paying attention to. To me, it was very similar in that regard.
And he gets great performances out of his actors, I think. And then he goes,
being an actor himself and being in there for so
Yeah.
long, I'm sure he creates a great set.
yeah, and I mean, and this is a kid who, like, I think at 18 months was in his first movie. At 18 months.
Yeah, but he wasn't that good at 18.
Yeah, well, yeah, he wet the bed
Wasn't
a
a very
lot.
strong performer.
I know. And, and then he does
direction
Angels
poorly.
and Demons. I guess his only maybe, I mean, of all of these movies, I guess maybe The Dilemma wasn't a great comedy. It was, I mean, he has some movies in there that are okay. at
But
best.
let's
with
talk
him-
about this. Go ahead.
He's always willing to take a shot. I mean,
Yes.
this isn't a franchise movie. This is
No.
based. I mean, it's based off of real life, but it's about okay, you may sell internationally, but
And largely independent.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
This is not a Hollywood
So
movie.
I like that from him, that he's kind of always stuck to something original.
Yeah. I
In
like
a
that.
time when everything is going, okay, get me another Superman.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Now, has anybody read anything? Is he making those choices specifically because he goes, no, I want to stay more independent in that regard. I don't want to go that route, or is he?
I mean, to answer, you could just with each movie, you see the passion that he puts.
Absolutely,
Into
I'm
it. So
just
I think
wondering
it
if
speaks
it-
for itself.
Well, I don't know that. I mean, I don't know what he's getting offered. I'm just asking if
Yeah,
what
well-
he says about it. I'm
But here's
just
the thing:
curious.
he's not. There's been so many articles, in the past about him and Brian Grazer
Right.
not. They used to be able to sell any movie. Now
Exactly.
it's very tough for them.
That's what I mean. I mean,
So-
I'm wondering what the
when I was done, when we finished watching Rush, I started to think of his filmography, and I'm like going, what was the last movie that he came out with? And we go, Frost Nixon? Well, that's a long time ago. That was like, Frost Nixon was 2008. Even The Dilemma came out in 2011. So we're talking, 2 years. Yeah, I think he's at a point in his life. He produces some good TV shows. And he can pick what he wants. And, this Heart of the Sea, I'm really looking forward to. It's based off the novel, which is drawn from the true story that inspired Herman Melville to write Moby Dick.
Okay.
And so it takes place back in the whaling days in Nantucket, and again, I think with Ron Howard there, I think we're going to get a really great story. It's a fantastic book, but he's good.
In terms of this one, though, a lot of people are saying this is one of his best movies in years. Do we agree with this?
Because it's been years.
But no, but seriously, but do we agree with this? Do we disagree with this?
I think it's one of his more accomplished films. Yes, I think as a filmmaker, this one technically had a lot of stuff going for it. You could tell his passion for racing and for race car drivers. I think it's one of his more accomplished films. Absolutely.
I would agree. I mean, on top of all of the character work that I really liked, I felt the passion for racing that I think it exudes. Just you could feel, for me, I could feel the speed of the cars, the intensity of the cars, the intensity of music, all of that combined into a sport that, although I actually do know a little bit about it, I haven't been to a lot of Formula One, and I felt like I was there, and it made me, like, I'm hoping that the tracks in Texas start doing well, and we can bring this sport more here. And when a movie can do that, when a movie can move you to want to experience something also in real life because you were so thrilled by it just on screen, I think that's great. So I would definitely say that this is, he has a lot of my favorite movies actually, especially like A Beautiful Mind, and this is such a different direction, and I loved it, so I think he did a great job.
Phil?
I 100% liked it. I liked, in the beginning the credits were kind of rolling and then it stopped and didn't get into anybody else. And I like that. Just let the movie be. I kind of hate opening credits.
Oh, okay.
Because then you kind of know what's going to be in it, and I like that I think to a degree that was
you
his
just want
choice.
to jump in.
Yeah, just jump in, and I like that, and everything was about the characters. Even just kind of every shot, you always knew someone was in the background, especially when they're on, in or around the racetrack. There's always, James is in the background or Niki's in the background. And I like, and I think he made very specific choices, and that was led by him.
Okay.
Although he did have a good team.
Marissa?
I liked this type of movie compared to his others because you can see him as an actor, him as a director. He's very versatile, and he shows a lot of different strengths here and there, especially his past few movies that he's adapted characters from stories or from like books and whatnot. And this movie is adapted from people in real life, and I think he depicted them in such a way, and even the sport in such a way that we can appreciate everything and really kind of want to learn more about these people and the sport after we leave the movie theater.
I agree. I thought what I loved most about it is the balance of it. I thought it was a character-driven piece and just in this world, and there wasn't too much of either. Otherwise, it would have been. I just think it would have missed. I like the balance of it. I thought, and I agree that now I want to know more about Formula One. Not only that, but I really want to know more of the story about these two guys. I really want to delve into that now because I'm fascinated. I want to know more about it. And for those reasons, I thought he did a great job with his directing on this. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah.
And what else do we have to say about directing on this?
No, I mean, again,
You think he's going to get an Oscar or not?
It's look, who knows? I don't know.
I think it's too late in the season.
It's.
I think it's too early for.
Yeah, I think
I
it's
don't
way
know.
too
That's what I meant.
early.
It's too. That's what I meant.
I mean, yeah, but being too early, that's not going to stop a movie like Blue Jasmine getting recognized. I think that with a movie like Rush, look, if they're going to allow 10 movies to be nominated, this one has a shot at being nominated. I think, and again, my apologies, my mea culpa. Yes, I was wrong regarding, it being number one, but, 10 million, we'll see what the legs are. Listen, CinemaScore did really well. Audiences are liking it.
They are liking
it. If it's able to hang around and more is written about it, we'll see. But I don't know. It's a good question. What do you guys think?
I would think for if it did get nominated, it would definitely be for like sound mixing, music score. Hans Zimmer, he's amazing, and he's done a lot of obviously big work for movies and stuff. So I think it would get more recognized on the technical aspects of the filmmaking rather than performance. Even though they were great and they were great performances from both the two leads, and I think the man who plays Niki. I'm blanking his name.
Daniel.
Yeah. I think Daniel would
Brühl.
get more recognition maybe as a supporting actor or lead actor over Chris.
I mean,
Chris.
when you brought up that question, it made me say I want them to win something. I do, but when placing it in my head, like what they should be nominated for, I'm not sure. And it's like I do think it's going to be. I agree with you, Marissa. I think it's going to be something technical, visual, music, something. And it's not against the acting. It's just that I don't know how it's going to hold up against what else is playing. I guess.
What's upcoming? I mean, the movie is. I like the movie a lot. And I came out and I was with a friend and we were talking about it and we really both liked it a lot. But we talked about Oscar and and its chances, and it's really interesting because it almost seems like it's like it's a tweener kind of a movie. It's very good, but will it stand up to what we might have in store? Like, will it stand up to a movie like A Wolf of Wall Street or
12 Years a Slave?
12,
I mean,
yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah,
that's
so
going to be tough.
But
it's going to be tough.
I don't think saying something deserves an Oscar doesn't makes it a
Any
better
less?
movie.
Oh,
or
no,
anything.
I
So
agree.
I think that to be clear, it's like sometimes movies win Oscars that the only time I ever saw them was in theater.
No,
and I'm
and
like,
I
you know
agree.
what? Yeah, you had a brilliant view of this, and yes, you should have won. But I love movies that I can watch over and over again, that I want to share with people. That when someone asks me, "Oh, have you seen this yet?" I'm like, "Oh, I saw it last week. We can watch it again, no problem." Like I think you need movies like that. So just because it's not like this deserves an Oscar for this category, I don't want to
I agree with you. I think it was just
movie
in the setting of this particular right now. Our conversation was Oscar, and it's interesting, and I don't think. Listen, Ron Howard can continue to go on, and he'll make
He'll be
movies.
fine.
And Heart of the Sea, I think, will be really good. And
What do you? I think this is one of those movies where people can appreciate the method of filmmaking. I mean, Marissa and I were talking about this. You hear all the sounds, right, of every noise of every engine, and then as soon as the visor goes down, silence. And so it points out these kind of moments and it heightens them. But I think the average moviegoer that may not be necessarily thinking of all these things now is can talk about film in a more artistic way rather than just the Avengers of like, oh, that was a cool punch.
No, and Marissa, to your point about going in not knowing anything, and there were some people, it's a movie about racing. Like there were it
just happens to be a racing. Could have been anywhere. But.
And and I think that the marketing, I think that Universal, who released it here, I just think it was an uphill battle to market this movie, and they went the only way they could try to go is if you want the women audience to go to this. I mean, it's hard to say, this is a really good movie where racing is just the setting. This is a humanistic story, but that is hard to market. And
well, I think that's why they're using Chris's face, but that's why they're always saying one of Ron Howard's best films in a year. I mean, that's why they're doing it.
And I think it also goes to show the visual aspects of how they actually shot it. All the close-up angles of the racetrack when the cars are flying by the camera lens. It gives, the way they shot it gave it so many different angles of it's sometimes the same path or sometimes the other racetracks, and made even the racing all that more interesting and forced the audience to look at a different angle.
All right, so let's talk about that real quick. Since we just talked about the way it was shot, let's get into cinematography.
I was gonna.
So, and you really appreciate it, Marissa. You thought it was great.
I appreciate it because when I think of racing, I've been just always thought it's a bunch of people going round and round in circles. But the way they shot this, I was like, it's not just that.
Well, especially Formula One, because they're all over the place.
It's about feeling the track and knowing your terrain and what you're driving
Having
on.
a good butt, so to speak.
Even their surroundings, the rain, how that affects the racing as well.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna pick up because cinematographer was Anthony Dodd Mantle. I believe I pronounced that correctly. And he worked on Slumdog Millionaire. He's worked with Danny Boyle.
And Last King of Scotland.
And Last King of Scotland. And what I loved about the look of this film, to add to what you were saying, it had this great 70s gritty look to it.
It reminded me how they shot Le Mans.
Le Mans, a Grand Prix.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's that. And what the other thing I loved is, obviously, I believe, I don't know for a fact, but it appeared as if they had used some stock footage of the crash. But if they
I think they did at some point, especially when he was watching it on TV.
But it looked seamless because it didn't take me out of like it wasn't polished. It had this gritty look to it from beginning to end, and that got me into the movie even more because it not only did it capture the time period of the cars, the technology, the clothing, the costuming, and everything, but it was the look. When you look at 70s movies, they had that film grit look to it, and that I thought was great for me, and it kept my interest throughout because it wasn't polished.
Right.
It looked like it came from the 70s.
And
I mean, I would say the things that stood out most to me were one, the reference to speed. I felt that they captured that really well. Just the momentum of these cars, the power that it ensues from going from the outside of the car to the inside of the car. I really liked that. Also, I mean, for me, I thought that there was a lot of focus on like the primary colors throughout this film: blues, reds, yellows. I mean, throw in a lot of white and green and whatnot. And I liked that. I liked that it did feel like I had like almost like a classic tone to it, not like a classic film, but just like these classic colors and this like basic instinct to drive and capturing that speed, and also the flames and the weather. I thought they embraced that really well. So on those levels, I liked it.
I like the muffler shots.
Oh yeah, great stuff. What about you, Phil? You filmmaker yourself?
Well, for me, I liked how they utilized their visualizations of everything, and even then they kind of vignetted the sides, and made those go out of focus, and it's just tunnel vision, because that's what they really had. They had tunnel vision for life.
What did you think when you talk about focus? What did you think about in the race once Niki Lauda's come back after being injured, and we see it's raining again?
Yeah.
And his vision, it seemed like the perspective was that it was really out of focus from his eyesight, and then as he's racing, it's going into focus. And the end, it definitely clears up.
Right.
For me, that was a little bit confusing. Like, how did you guys feel?
I think it was just a visual thing of him being rattled, and they were just trying to demonstrate that he's off kilter.
Overcoming
He's out of focus.
He's not there.
focused.
He's not present completely.
I like that shows that he started into the race not knowing what he was getting into again,
Right.
like the first race when he got into the crash. But then when it cleared up, it also reflected his mind, like, oh, I get it. I shouldn't be racing. I know where I can end up if I can end up in another crash. So he got, metaphorically, another, that cleared up for him in his mind too.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was making his decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It
I
was all
thought
the more
so
clear.
much of this. I really enjoyed a lot of the cinematography. I love it when the camera was on the car, and so you get that nice long angle shot of the driver on the side and everything. And there's so much of it I liked. I have to say though, the one thing I didn't like, it was just so much. It was too much of the Les Miserables. It was too much of the close-up for me. I wanted every once in a while, I wanted context, and because for me, sometimes it made it feel small. I'm watching
Really?
it, yeah. Because I never got a context. Very rarely did you get a context of the stands or the track. I mean, and I don't know if it was a budgetary thing because maybe they just didn't have it.
Here's the
or
thing.
didn't
For me,
wanna
it
spend
felt like a choice. I didn't, it was always about them. It didn't, okay, so there's fans in the stands. Who cares?
I'm not necessarily talking about fans in the stands. I'm just as a viewer. I'm going. You're so in close up so much. I'm going. All right. Give me. I just wanted context, just like I felt in Les Miserables. Everybody hated that for that reason. I was thinking the same time. Say, please, just a wide shot would be nice every once in a while.
Well, they had some overhead shots.
They
of
did.
The track
I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying I liked the close-ups. I thought they were great. I'm just saying it would have been nice to have a balance. And context.
I'm gonna go and say I think that a lot of today's movie-going audience, and I don't mean this to I don't mean to be offensive here, but I think a lot. You're talking about a race car movie, so I think a lot of the audience today, they're used to Fast and Furious as being, or even a movie like Driven, with Stallone. You're expecting a Rennie Harlin fast cut, and it's just edit, and everything looks fast. To me, this movie really took its time. So you were in the turns with them, and you got to see that tunnel vision, which you're talking about. But I like that.
Totally agree with all of that. All I'm saying is there were times when I'm watching it,
they let the scene
and it was
play.
so in tight mediums and tight
Just
close-ups.
because you didn't like the needle going down the throat in a close-up doesn't
No,
mean you have to hate the
I-
movie, John.
I like that too. I'm not even saying I hate the movie. What I'm saying specifically is, there were times it made it feel small, and I didn't want the movie to feel small. I wanted it to feel bigger than that. And
I liked how they had a lot of close-ups to go be devil's advocate. I liked the close-ups because it really did bring you into the that it made it more intensified
the
everything.
And see, and
personal.
this
And
is
the
why I
thing is,
disagree, because
if
if you don't
if
have
they-
anything to compare it to, it's always in close up.
No,
Who
but
cares?
if they brought you out of it with a wide shot, it might have made a crash seem less intense.
I mean, but on that note, I felt like one of the widest shots we did get was of Mount Fuji
Right.
over and over again, and what that like represented to the film. And for me, that made that point stand out more. And like I
agree.
made me consider like where they are, where they've come, and that's the big like ending
Mountain to climb.
side. Exactly. But
Yeah.
so
I
you
mean,
do,
it's
I
fun.
do agree that it wasn't quite. There was no balance between close up and wide, but I did like that they at least included that at some.
I did too. I just think that it would have benefited from
For
it
more.
because then you when every once in a while when you get a wide, then you see the entire landscape in which you're in, and then I think it's more effective every once in a while to do that, so that when you come back to a close up, there's some juxtaposition there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to me, it made the racing to me a little more personal. It was a personal movie, and I
Right.
think the racing was like I did feel like the rush and on
Yeah.
a big screen, and that to me,
Absolutely,
you know,
and here's the thing I'm trying to get across is
Yeah.
I agree with that because it did. I felt the intensity of
Yeah,
that. I
yeah.
especially loved when the first time well, a couple of different times when we're showing the cars up close when they're just
Yeah,
starting out.
I
That
know.
overhead shot, you see
Yeah.
the gas
Oh
in
my
the thing.
head,
You're
it was awesome.
I mean, those things are amazing. I
Yeah.
love that stuff.
And again, it was I just go back to Ron Howard really set everything up. It really looked fantastic that way. Yeah. So you wanted more. You
I
know?
absolutely did.
You know.
Yeah, and honestly, as I'm watching it, every once in a while, I went, it felt cheap and small, and I just went, I don't want this.
You
to feel
realize
this
if
way.
I see this again, you're probably going to ruin the
I
experience.
beg your pardon.
for me.
Here we go.
I'm going to go, oh, damn it, another
All right,
close up?
yeah.
I hope to prove the other way because
Yeah.
I don't know. I disagree in terms. I think there were so many wide shots and things like that.
Yeah.
But such
Well,
is life.
and I'm not saying that there wasn't enough for me.
You know, and.
Well, the budget went to Hans Zimmer. How about that?
There you
Sean?
go. Well, then, speaking of Hans Zimmer, let's move on. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
You think that?
music.
So you think they spent a lot of money for the music? Do you?
Nah, well, I mean, anytime you get Hans Zimmer,
Yeah.
there's got to be some money involved.
Yeah.
But
What'd you think?
I thought it. You know, I thought it worked really well. Again, it was one of those things where if you didn't tell me that was Hans Zimmer, I wouldn't be like, "Oh, that's Hans Zimmer."
Until the very end.
Yeah.
Until the very, very. I agree. But yeah.
Did you guys have any favorite musical moments throughout this film?
That's a good-
They used the motif with you know, if Marisa, if you want to play that, you know, they used you kind of knew when something was gonna there was kind of the motif and they varied it throughout and it was subtle. You know, their sound effects may not have been subtle, but the music was
the
a
music
little bit more.
was, you know, and for Hans Zimmer, like again, had I not known, like when I saw the name at the credits, I was like, Hans Zimmer. I said, this had to have been, in my opinion, like this is the guy that's done like the, you know, Man of Steel, Dark Knight trilogy, Pirates of the Caribbean,
Inception.
you know, Inception, you know, a lot. He has been criticized for being like overly bombastic, like in your face. And I like a lot of his scores. I have a lot of his soundtracks. This one to me was the most understated Hans Zimmer score for what's essentially a fast-paced racing movie. I agree with you. I thought the bed of music was subtle. It didn't take away from the action at all. But it was at the very, very end, going into the end credits, I was like, that's the Hans Zimmer that I know and love. Everything else I thought played very, for him, it was subtle. And I appreciated that. I was like, hey, you know, wow, that's fantastic. He did I thought the score was fantastic. Towards the end, it was great. Yeah.
I think it goes to show that simple is sometimes easier. You know, you don't have to be bombastic like he usually is with foghorns and whatnot. Because I didn't realize it was Hans until the end when they play the credits. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that was amazing. The thing with the music, it really reflected the emotions of what was going
Yeah.
on through all the scenes.
I mean, I would just have to say what stuck out most to me is I really wasn't that aware of the music behind a lot of the dialogue, the sound and the music that accompanied the cars, which was what really got me. In the beginning, you get like this big ominous beat that comes with like the revealing of our first like race car that we see, and then in the race, later on in the film, I want to say it's the one where there's the accident, you get this driving force that you expect to have like some sort of climax, and it just like never really does. It doesn't let up for, I want to say, over 30 seconds. It's so long and so has your heart pounding. So to me, that's what I was pulling away from sound. That's what I was like understanding. I couldn't tell you what the music was like for most of like, the character conversations.
Here's what could have been, you know, most movies would have done. They would have separated out the music for one character and the other character. And I like that they didn't go that route because they are one and the same.
They did a little bit though. They did a little bit.
Slight variation because they're slightly different.
There's no, but there's also a lot of in the 70s tracks that are like played, like
the source music,
those are often played behind James Hunt's characters. They're not nearly as much played.
It's because he's in a nightclub most of the time, and he's in a drunken stupid.
But that makes sense.
Not even just when he's in the nightclub, but when he's in these other settings where there isn't.
It's party
it's
boy.
Not,
yeah.
Yes, it does follow him a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
That's
did
a good
you think
point.
of? What did you think of the score, John?
I wasn't really aware of it. I agree that I didn't even notice it, even paying attention to it during some dialogue scenes. I really have nothing to say about it because it didn't.
It didn't hurt the movie.
I don't even remember it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing.
See, and to me, that is so unlike a Hans Zimmer score.
Oh, I agree with you on that.
At least of most recent times of the big movies that he has done. You know, score is there. It's in your face. And this one, it was
I do remember
nice.
the only musical thing I can remember is when I think it was the first race when Steve Winwood kicked in.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome.
I thought that was a great moment.
That was great.
That was the only thing I remember musically, to be honest.
Give me
with
some
you.
lovin'.
Yeah. It was the only thing I actually remember about
See, and I kind of like the idea that, yes, they did use that song, but they didn't play a bunch of 70s songs throughout the whole movie. Because I feel if you use songs, then you're kind of making your movie in a certain time period. And this movie is really about the characters, even though they were in 1976 or in the 1970s, that they're making this movie timeless.
Yeah, I agree with you.
With a music score.
And it looked to me, again, just going back to cinematography for a second, it looks timeless. Like, it won't get old. Because and they didn't exploit the 70s. They just used the 70s as a setting. So are we going to talk about some favorite scenes?
Well, we will. But I was just going to talk editing real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Phil is an editor, so we got to get his take on this. Well, why don't you
Phil,
jump in about the editing? No, I'll jump in too. But I want you to think about it because let me say, I agree. It was brisk. I mean, I was laughing at one point because we had the obvious cut too from him. I should say James and the stewardess to the cranks and the pistons.
Yeah.
I go, okay, all right, that's where we're gonna go. All right, you might as well. Okay, go ahead. But,
that's why it was rated R.
Yeah, exactly. But and there was a couple other ones that I thought were neat cutbacks. Anyway,
I liked it. I liked it because it was for a movie like this, it was very fast paced. The editing was on beat, and I liked they tied in a lot of it. We joked about this when we did The World's End, but they had a guy cross frame, and this one there was kind of if you noticed there was stuff like that, and I don't know exactly what it was, but it bled from one to the other, and especially when they were separated, right? When someone's watching TV, whether it is going back to Susie, she's watching James, and things like that, or later on. And I like that aspect of it, that it was always flowing from character to character despite the time and space.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought the editing was taut. And again, he's using guys that he's been working together with since like day one. So
he's got a good team.
He's got a great team, and it's number one, the loyalty, but I think, especially when it comes to editing and cinematography, but editing, you get to, bless you, you get to know like your director, and you work as a team because you know what each other, what you like. And it's almost like you can think about, ooh, all right, this is a good cut. And I thought that the pacing of the pacing of the movie, it was 2 hours, never overstayed its welcome. I didn't get bored. The only thing I was looking at my watches is like, when's the crash coming? And, because we knew that was going to happen. And I was, like I said, I was pleasantly surprised that it came towards the latter end. So, but editing was,
before
for
we
me,
get, we want to say Dan Hanley and Mike Hill.
Yep.
So
There we go.
okay.
Throw out those names.
Anything you want to say?
I
on
was
that?
pretty much agreeing with Phil, and then then I started thinking about something. Anyway, no, about editing. I mean, it was fine.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to say about it, honestly.
I don't. I mean, I didn't see. I mean, it was briskly paced, and
Yeah.
it never stayed anywhere too long, and it just kept moving. But never, and it was never too fast, except when you're in the car. But that's the way it's supposed to be.
But you know, but it wasn't overcut again.
Not at all.
And I think
Yeah,
that's,
and even
that's the
that
thing with,
when they were racing, it didn't feel that overwhelming, like
Right.
in your face. You
Yeah.
felt on the track,
Yeah.
but it's not like, oh my God, you're gonna crash too.
yeah,
kind
and
of.
and again, I think it's to the credit of the editors and Ron Howard. It makes it more personal when you're not cutting so fast,
Yeah.
and it makes it more humanistic. And it's nice to see like dialogue happening between people and not having to cut all the time. And yeah, it's well
All right,
done.
we have only a few minutes left. We talked acting throughout, but we haven't specifically any standout acting
Performances?
or scenes since you mentioned it, Demetri. We'll
I'll
start
defer
with
to
Sarah.
you.
Are
defer
we
to Sarah.
deferring to
Ladies
me
first.
first?
Ladies first. Unless somebody else is ready to jump in.
I mean, you're gonna have to make me think of my favorite scene in this.
No,
right
I like-
now.
you don't have to. You can top
I would
three.
s-
You don't have to.
I mean,
do
I would
top.
say the thing that had I most visceral reaction to was definitely the hospital with Lauda and his scenes with his wife, and definitely the helmet. I actually loved
Yeah.
that scene. For Hunt and Hemsworth, I'm trying to think of my favorite scenes with them. This is more of like a character scene. I know they added it in because it didn't happen. Was when he beat up the photographer.
Yeah.
I was just
After
about
the
to
press
say.
conference, in that little room. I felt like empowered with
You
them.
cheer. I mean,
you
yeah, our
do.
audience clapped.
And then
Yeah, but sorry to cut you off there. They did add that to the movie, but the story when the reporter was asking all those rude questions about his appearance, that actually did happen.
Oh.
yes, yeah, but exactly, and the racing scenes. I think I was really carried through this movie by the racing scenes, and although the crash wasn't exploited, I thought that was filmed very well.
Yeah, it was filmed very well. Yeah, I mean, one of my I already talked about earlier the hospital scene with his wife, helmet putting on, but I did love the scene. You know, even if it was made up, I love the scene where Hunt beats up on the reporter, because it does a couple of things. You go back to the beginning of the movie. Right there, it says, you know what? I respect Lauda. I like this guy. He didn't deserve that. It's probably my fault. This guy, what a rat he was for doing this and making him do it. And you get that cathartic, yeah, and you understand right there and then that what Lauda said at the beginning, we're rivalries. We love to bust each other's balls. And that right there set it apart, that they weren't really enemies. They didn't hate each other. That was a sign of great respect to me, and I like that scene a lot too.
Can I add in two more that I just thought of? You put me on first, now I'm thinking about it. At the beginning of one of the races, it was just a capture of a moment of an exchange between them. You had Hunt kind of ahead in the pack. It's right before they take off, and they turn around and they have a nod to each other, and just like that nod, that moment before they put the visor down. And it was great to me that it was Lauda who looked away first, and you still got Hunt kind of staring back, waiting for him to break the contact, and taking that moment of acknowledgement, of getting ready. I loved that. Just those little instances were
Yeah.
really fun for me.
Again, made it humanistic.
That was one.
I had
And a
another one,
second.
didn't I?
Yes, you
That's
did.
okay. You think about it while Phil talks, and then you can add
Okay,
it.
and then great.
Well, I'm a Niki kind of guy. I liked him a lot.
Ah, yeah. Nice.
I did. But that's also because I'm partially. I saw him. He was in Goodbye Lenin. It was a
Oh, you
great
mean the
movie.
actor, okay.
Yes, the actor, and he did really fantastic
Boone.
in that. And so, I kind of recognized him right away from that,
I liked him from
Like-
Inglourious Bastards. That's what I
Right.
recognized him
Yes,
from.
yes.
which I assume would be most people
Yeah.
instead of Goodbye Lenin.
Phil, you're done because I remembered my other.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, when we get to see Lauda have a little fun when he first
Yeah.
meets Marlene, and they have the two fans in the back. And first you get the classic woman on the side of the road hitchhiking,
Right.
And of course, and then the two fans just go straight up to Lauda, and with such recognition. And then we see that shift where he does decide to take their car and
Pardon the
drive
pun.
fast.
And that was a good bait and switch scene too.
Ah.
I think that was a great sequence. I love
it.
that.
Excellent
great
sequence. Yeah, I really.
Because it's all
Fantastic.
character. There's no reason to drive fast. I don't have it's all very computer-like. And then finally, I thought that was great.
That was a great scene.
I love that scene. I appreciated Daniel's acting a lot in this. I thought Chris did a fine job, but I really liked watching Daniel perform. And the scenes I liked were the ones when he told his wife that happiness is the enemy. I thought, God, that's a brutal scene. Your wife right there, happiness is the enemy. Basically, you should tell her that. Yeah, this is not gonna work. This is not good for me.
Yeah, it's not a great way to start a honeymoon or something.
Terrible.
Yeah.
That was great.
But in his own way, I like the scene where they go. He says, "I have a family event that I have to get to."
Yeah.
Little do we know that it's him getting married.
Exactly.
He says,
and even that the scene where he proposes. Well, if I'm gonna do this, might as well be with you.
Yeah.
But he's sincere in his own way.
Yes. He actually meant that.
Quite a
because we see with James and Susie, they just get married like immediately afterwards, and then we've seen Marlene for a while. We've come to like her character, and then we understand he really does mean that when he says that.
I'm not debating that. I think he does mean it, but
it's just funny
the depth of which he means it and how he says it. Fascinating.
And again, I think it's by the way Daniel Bruhl played it. I think it was great.
And then I also really love the scene at the end between the two guys, between Hunt and when they're in the little airport hangar. Airplane hangar. I thought that was great. And also the scene right after that when you're actually hearing I assume it's the actual Niki Lauda's voice. Talking about that, you're seeing the actual archival footage of them, and that was very effective.
And again, it didn't take away from the movie.
Not at all.
Because it looked...
For me, it enriched it.
Yeah.
And the whole voiceover at the end with him saying, he was one of the few I liked, even fewer that I respected, and the only one I envied. I thought,
that was...
Forget it. That's it. That's what I mean. That for me was the best the movie had to... for me, it was the best moment of the movie. I wanted more of that throughout.
Yeah, I understood.
Maybe it wouldn't have meant as much.
It may not have.
If the whole movie was like
well,
that.
We could have hit that a few more times. I mean, All right. Any last words? What do we want to talk about? Any last things we want to say?
No, I think Rush is great, and thank you for joining.
You're saying go see it, everybody's...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but we're assuming you've seen it already, and hey, the federal government may not be here for you, but Anatomy of a Movie... We're here for you. We're working. This great group of non-essential personnel. We are here for you today, October 1st.
Final thoughts. Go see the movie. Let's see.
We imagine you have.
Yeah. We hope you have. Otherwise, the spoilers are crazy.
Go see it again.
Yeah, there you go.
Take friends to go with you.
Yeah, take a friend.
James Hunt has my dog in there. That giant dog. It's huge. It's shaggy. It's in the back of the car.
Oh, all right. Okay.
No, don't worry about it.
Marissa?
Excellent.
How do you spell Ferrari?
I love this movie, and I have a greater
questions.
respect for the people, the drivers, the art of what racing really is.
Yeah. All right. So.
And I like Niki telling Ferrari to fuck off. You have all these test facilities, and this is the crap you put out.
Oh, that was great
that
too.
was awesome,
Anyway, that was great.
Yeah. All right.
Good movie.
All right.
Follow us at what is it?
follow us
Movie
at-
Anatomy
At Movie Anatomy
on Twitter.
on Twitter.
There we go.
And John, good to
Check
see
out our
you
new
again.
website that we are currently building.
Is the website up? Can we give that info out?
Check out Anatomy of a Movie, Movie Anatomy on Twitter, all that fun stuff. We're here for the long haul. Thank you guys for being a part of this. We'll see you
Thanks.
at the next
final thought.
screening.
Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff. We would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.